Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala rasulillah. Welcome everybody. Inshallah, we're going to continue with part 2 of our lecture. Last week we started the lecture called Lady Rahmah, Causation and Feminism. Today we're going to talk more about the story of Lady Rahmah. What is causation? What is causation and how do Muslims understand causation? What is causation? For the older people, because you guys middle school, high school, guys going to college, in college, causation. What is it? We talked about just the last lesson, understanding cause and effect. Okay? So in Islam, let's mention the right position first. In Islam, we understand that there is only one God, one creator. Okay? Allah is the creator of the causes, and Allah is the creator of the effects. And what we usually witness in terms of cause and effect, it is the customary norm of things. Those things like when water reaches 32 degrees Fahrenheit, what do we expect? Yes, brother? For the water to freeze. So we say the water froze at 32. The water froze at 32 degrees. So we say the air temperature causes, or the water temperature caused the water to what? To freeze. But we know as Muslims that in reality Allah is the one who willed for the water to freeze at that particular time, at that particular temperature. And it is conceivable to your mind that the water might still be in liquid form at 25 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Or that the water could freeze at what? 45 degrees Fahrenheit. But we are judging things, how we operate is according to the customary norm. This is how things usually happen. But we know who is the one who makes the things happen, who creates the things. There is only one God, the Creator Allah. Is that clear for everybody? So what did we mention last week? We mentioned the incident with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, which shows us that cause and effect is not something definite. It is usually how things happen, like with Prophet and fire, in the case of fire. What happened with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? What happened with Prophet? Yes, Brother Omar. And so Prophet Ibrahim was catapulted into a fire, and he didn't burn in his flesh and he didn't burn in his clothing. Okay? So is that the norm of things? No. It is contrary to the norm. But as we just mentioned in the last lesson, does this contradict logic? No, it doesn't contradict logic, because we know that there's only what? One creator. The fire itself does not give itself its properties. The flesh does not give itself what? Its properties. The fire does not specify itself with the power to burn flesh. Okay? But rather Allah Ta'ala wills usually that when the flesh comes in contact with fire, for instance, that the flesh will what? That the flesh will burn. But Allah is the one who is making this happen. It's not the fire in and of itself. If you put fire to paper, it's not the paper willing for itself to be burnt by the fire, and it's not the fire in and of itself willing to burn the paper, but rather Allah wills for the paper to burn when in contact with the fire. Is that clear? So what do? We just summarize causation, cause and effect. This is how we understand it. And then we talked a little bit about feminism. And in brief, that the feminists, they are claiming that they believe in men and women having identical rights. And in Islam, we don't say that. We say that our religion establishes justice. Is this clear? Justice. So there are rights that women have that men don't have. And there are rights that men have that women don't have. If somebody asks, well, why is that? Like they want to understand. Well, we say that Allah is the creator. Allah knows about us, and Allah knows what is best for us. Okay? So we don't determine right and wrong just by what many people around us do. We go back to the rules of the religion. What does the religion say about this matter? Didn't we mention in the previous lesson that there was something women can do but men can't do? Yes, what did we say? Wear silk. The women are allowed to wear silk, but the men are not allowed to wear silk. There are some details about it, but in general for men. But as a rule, the men are not allowed to wear silk. So we don't say men and women are equal. We say that Islam establishes justice, and there are certain rights that men have and certain rights that women have. Is that clear? So don't start using certain words that these people use, because you'll find yourself in trouble. Okay? So, because sometimes a person might say, well, in Islam there's equality. Don't use it like that, because the man, he can have more than one wife. The wife can only have one husband. Is that clear? So don't use that language. Use the religious language as the base of how you discuss these matters, inshallah. So, okay, now we're going to go into another topic. We're going to talk about Lady Rahmah, who is the daughter of Ibrahim. Not Ibrahim the Prophet. Let's give a little backdrop. There was, we're going to mention about the scholar Al-Hakim. Al-Hakim was a famous scholar of hadith. Like Al-Bukhari was a famous scholar of hadith. Imam Muslim was a famous scholar of hadith. Abu Dawood was a famous scholar of hadith. Among the most famous scholars is a man named Al-Hakim, and he wrote a book, compiled the hadith in a collection called Al-Mustadrak. So he mentions something that happened in another book of his called At-Tarikh, which means the history. And this is the history of Naysabur. Where is Naysabur? Anybody know? MashaAllah. In Central Asia, including what is today northern Iran, or at least northern Iran, to those areas north of there, like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, what else? Turkmenistan, parts of Afghanistan, even parts of Pakistan.
They call it Caucasus now, right?
Huh?
Caucasus?
The Caucasus, yeah, in that area. So the Muslims have ruled in that region for a long time. Originally, Iran, what was Iran called in the old days? Persia. Originally, the Persian regions of the Muslim lands. This is after the Muslims moved into took over those regions. Originally, the people of Persia / Iran, originally they were Sunni. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, some of their rulers became Shiite, and then that's how Iran became a Shiite country. But originally it was Sunni. Many of the famous Sunni scholars came from Persia, so meaning Iran, such as Imam al-Ghazali, for example, Imam al-Bayhaqi. They came from that region. Okay, so Al-Hakim, he wrote Al-Mustadrak, which is a famous book of hadith, or collection of hadith, and then he has another book, At-Tarikh, which is a book of history. And often when the Muslim scholars would write books of history, they would report different transmissions about different historical events through the scholars who lived in that area. Okay? And this is a way you'll see how the Muslims preserve the knowledge. It's not just like hearsay. Okay? Because sometimes the Western people, when they talk about Islamic studies, because they have a reason to try to slander Islamic scholarship, they try to belittle it. And when we examine Islamic history, how the history was preserved and transmitted, it's very thorough, very careful. So Al-Hakim, he mentions in his book, the Tarikh, the history of Naysabur, he said, I heard Abu Zakaria Yahya, the son of Muhammad, Al-Ambari, saying that he heard from Abu Isa ibn Muhammad ibn Isa At-Tahmani. This is the name you want to focus on. At-Tahmani Al-Maruzi from Merv. It's, I think, in Turkmenistan. It's all that area of Central Asia. That he said, and then he said, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala shows the people whatever He willed at the time He willed. That from among His signs, so that we can take lessons. And by that, Allah strengthens Islam, meaning that there are different extraordinary events that have happened throughout our history. And for the Muslims, when they see those extraordinary events, what does it do? It strengthens their yaqeen, their certitude that this is the haqq, that this is the true religion. And he said, Allah Ta'ala supports what he revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and by that he supports the guidance which he reveals to Prophet Muhammad, and he supports the miracles of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because we said in the last lesson, how do you know that a prophet is a prophet? What do they do to prove that they are prophets?
Miracles.
They do the mu'jizat, they do the miracles. Very good answer. And he, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, makes the meanings of the message of the Prophet more clear, and he strengthens Islam so no one can discredit it. A little bit later in history, in this general region, what happened? You had the Mongol hordes. They swept through that region and they committed all sorts of atrocities and killed millions and millions of people. The Mongols were barbarians. But what happened to the Mongols? Many of the tribes of the Mongols, what happened? They became Muslims. What was one of the reasons that they became Muslims? Because they saw the ultra-righteous Muslims, the awliya, do different karamat. That they did these extraordinary acts, and when they saw those things, then they converted to Islam. So Allah Ta'ala supports the religion through different ways. We talk about when we learn about the knowledge, right? So one way to support and defend the religion is through what? The creed, being able to what? Argue and defend our belief. Another way Allah Ta'ala supports the religion is that Allah gives some of the pious people these karamat. So people see these incredible things, and it makes it clear that the truth of this religion is undeniable. So, among the matters which I heard in my era, and I know about with certainty, because keep in mind this is At-Tahmani, Al-Hakim is narrating this event from this scholar At-Tahmani. He said, among the matters which I heard about in my era, and I knew about with certitude, is a matter which made me more sure about the truthfulness of our religion and strengthened my belief in our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And especially in particular, what about the merit of jihad, meaning the holy war. But here we don't mean what these guys are doing, blowing up buses and going around committing massacres. We're talking about the genuine, those people who fight in what is just, and they fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with complete sincerity. And about the status of the martyrs, Allah ta'ala revealed in the Quran, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يَرْزَقُونَ. Which means, this is talking about the people who had fallen, the Muslims who had fallen on the battlefield. It says, do not think that the martyrs are like the other dead people. They are alive in the place honored by Allah, enjoying delicious foods and living in the light. Meaning that what happens to the souls of the martyrs when they are killed? Instantly their soul goes to paradise. And the pleasure that the soul of the martyr in paradise is so intense that there is a spiritual connection between the soul in paradise and the body that's on earth. That the body of that person who was killed on the battlefield, that Muslim who was killed on the battlefield with what? Fighting justly, with what? With sincerity. They're fighting justly, with sincerity, that physical body here on earth does not decay. And there are many reports throughout Islamic history where maybe there was a flood through a graveyard area and they find bodies, people have been there 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, and the body is still not even stiff. This is something astounding. So in this case, this scholar, he's mentioning this, At-Tahmani. And he says this matter, he's talking about what made him more sure about the truthfulness of the religion of Islam. He said, this matter, which I experienced and I know firmly about it, is that I went in the year 238 to the suburbs of Khwarazm, which this is part of Khorasan, this whole region. I'm not clear exactly where it is, but it's part from northern Iran or a part of Iran up into the stands. And he said it is in the western side of the Jehun Valley. And the distance from it to the great city is a half a day walking. I was told that a woman among the wives of the martyrs lives in that city, and that she saw in her dream that she was fed something. And since then, she does not eat and she does not drink anything. We're going to go into our story in a minute, inshallah. And this dream took place during the rulership of Abu Abbas ibn Tahir, who was the ruler of Khorasan, and he died 8 years prior, meaning prior to when he is giving this report. And then Sheikh Samir, he mentioned some things about the story. He said that Al-Hakim, as we said, he is a famous hadith scholar, and that he authored a history about the city of Naysabur, which is again in the eastern region of the Muslim lands at that time. And when you think about this, like how vast the Islamic world has been historically, of course now even more so, but Islam spread from beyond the Arabian Peninsula. It went up into the stands, meaning what is now Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, went all the way east to the frontier of China, all the way across North Africa, the Northwest Africa, into what? To Portugal, into Spain, even into what? Southern France, into Sicily, into parts of Italy, even parts of Switzerland. In the early days, I'm not talking about contemporary. Also, the Muslims crossed the Sahara, went into West Africa, went along the east coast of Africa. They traveled, of course, through India, all the way to the Far East, to the Philippines, to Indonesia, to Malaysia. It's astounding. And not saying we were perfectly united, but the culture and the religion of Islam, meaning the cultural practices and, of course, the belief, there was a sense of unity amongst the Muslims across a vast array of people. And this is all coming from the teachings of what? One person who came with what? The message of worship the Creator and not the creation. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, so Sheikh Samir just mentions that this some background about who Al-Hakim is, and he, like we said, he's a very famous scholar. Now, At-Tahmani goes on to say, first he heard about the story in 238, and then he says, he said the first time I heard about it, like he was young, he was passing through the city at that time, At-Tahmani. Then he says, I passed by that city again in the year 242. I saw her, and she told me what happened to her. I did not check what she said, and I did not ask for more details because I was still young at that time. Still, this is 242. Then I returned to the city, to that region, in the year 252, and I knew that she was still alive. And I found that her story is what? Famous. If somebody is living in your town and it's known that he or she hasn't eaten for years, don't you think people are going to talk? Okay, there's no internet, of course, back then, okay? So people are going to what? Say there's a person in our town that she hasn't eaten for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. Okay, people are going to talk about it. So this area is where a lot of the travelers used to come, because I think this is part of the Silk Road. You know, the Silk Road went all the way from China all the way to Syria. Okay, this is the overland route. Again, the Muslims, mashallah, historically, mashallah, what an awesome empire. When you know your religion is something to take what great pride in. Of course, to be the proper belief in the Creator, the proper belief in the prophets. But when you look at the vastness of the Islamic civilization, it is something to be what? To be proud of. To take pride that, alhamdulillah, I am part of this civilization. This is part of my legacy. This is part of my heritage as a Muslim. So he mentions that a lot of people are talking about her story because so many people are passing through that city and they hear about her. So he says, when I arrived in the area, I sought her out, and I found her outside the city. And I was looking for her, and I was going from village to village, and then I found her as she was walking. And he said, when I encountered her, she was walking with strength. Usually, if you think that somebody hasn't eaten for a few days, what's going to happen? How are they going to walk? Weak. Here's this woman has not eaten for years, and he sees that she's walking in a say, vigorous way. So she looks what? Healthy. So he said, I found her, and she was walking with strength. She was middle-aged, and she had a good posture. And her cheeks were rosy. Keep this in mind. Meaning, so she had like energy, and she had health, mashallah. She was also very clever. She walked next to me while I was riding. And I offered her to ride another animal, but she did not accept. She chose to what? To walk. And then he said, they were with me. So now he's telling, okay, when this happened, now he's going to tell you other people that he was with. He says, there were with me some people from the traders, some of the leaders among the farm workers. Among them also was a faqih, meaning a scholar of Islamic law. His name was Muhammad ibn Hamdawayh al-Harithi. There was another person named Musa ibn Harun al-Bazzar, who was a famous scholar of hadith. But I know there's an al-Bazzar, but I'm not sure if that's the same famous scholar of hadith. And he said, I acquired hadith from this scholar when he acquired hadith from that scholar when he was in Mecca. So now he's letting you know the connection, so that when the scholars want to check the isnads, they look, okay, who did he learn this from? And then they check, okay, well, was this person in this city at this time? So then they're able to cross-reference. Because back then you did not have links. You could not just post a link and say, okay, here's the connection, or Wikipedia. So how do you know where this person took his knowledge from? You have to check who does he claim he took his knowledge from? And then you can cross-reference his claims. And this is all the science of hadith, is all part of, or the science of isnad, the chains of narration. This is all part of the way the knowledge is preserved and confirmed. Also among them was another person, a young man named Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman. And he was somebody who was involved with the judges at the time. And he said, I asked them, this is the original scholar that we mentioned, At-Tahmani. He said, I asked them about her. There's this woman who's known in your area. She has not eaten for what, years? So he asked them, well, what's her situation? And he said, and all of them, they praised her. And they said good things about her. And they said, her story is widespread amongst us and is well known, and you would not find two people among us who disagree about her case. So what's he saying? That it's common knowledge that this is her situation. Now another person, Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman, he was one of the people that was in the caravan. He said, I heard about her when I was a young man. I grew up hearing the people talking about her. So I dedicated a period of my life to check about her situation and to ask her about her situation. I did not notice anything bad in her behavior. So now these scholars are talking about what? Her character. See how they're all cross-referencing one another? She is a woman with good manners, far from doing silly actions, and far from seeking the haram. She's what? An upright Muslim woman. She's a pious Muslim woman. He said, I never knew about her even one lie, and I could never see anything sly or cunning or sneaky. So she's known, she has good character. The other scholars said, she's clever, she's intelligent, she doesn't commit sins. This is a righteous Muslim woman. So going back on the subject of feminism, we say in Islam that we are for women's rights, but women's rights are not the same as feminism. Okay, don't mix them. The feminists claim to be for women's rights, but they are not. We as Muslims, we believe everyone should get the rights that Allah Ta'ala has given them. Because our rights come from the Creator, and they don't come from our opinions. Okay? And when we want to look at a woman that we want to praise, there are many of them, many scholars among the women. We said Ibn Asakir, who we know, but we said among him he had over about 100 female scholars that were his teachers. Okay, so it's not unusual in the Islamic history. So let's go back to her. At-Tahmani now mentions, or let's mention what Abdullah ibn Abdul Rahman said. He said that the rulers who governed the region, when they came to power, now they would do something unjust to her. They would lock her in her house, and they would prevent her from leaving. Why they did this? Well, it's going to be mentioned why, but it's not just. You cannot do this to a person. And they would prevent her from coming out. And then they would leave her there for a month or 2 months or maybe more. And they never saw her eating or drinking. She's locked in the house. Nobody can get her food and she can't get out. And yet after a couple of months, she's still what? Alive. What's the norm if you go 2-3 months without eating? What's going to happen?
You're going to starve.
You're going to starve to death. So after it's clear that she didn't eat, she didn't drink, there's no sign of defecating, going to the bathroom, then they would let her go and then they would give her gifts. This is not the right way to do things. But what is it doing? It's another way to confirm that her story is true. You see this? Even though what they did is wrong, it confirms that her story is true. So At-Tahmani says, when all of the people who lived in that area agreed that she was truthful, I asked her, meaning I went to her, to tell me her story. So he's what? He heard about her, then he asked around about her, and now he's going to what? Go to her. So what is your story? Because now it's confirmed. You have all these people saying she's a good woman, she's an honest woman, she's upright, she's trustworthy, she's truthful. So all these people are giving the same reports. So okay, now it's my turn to what? Go and ask her. Well, what is your situation? So he said that her name is Rahmah bintu Ibrahim, the daughter of Ibrahim. And she was married to a poor carpenter who used to obtain money only from this profession. And every day he earned just enough for that day. So they say like hand to mouth. He worked, he put in his work, he got enough food for what? That day, then he would work the next day, get enough food for what? For that day. And this issue of being poor Islamically, we're not talking about like in this country, but in Islam, that the poor, who are most of the people of paradise?
Poor.
The poor. Okay, it's not something to be ashamed of. There's nothing that should be ashamed to be poor in this country. But usually in this country, a lot of the poor people, they don't have good qualities. In the Muslim countries, very often you go to the poor people, they are very humble, they are very kind, they are very considerate. And a lot of times you go to the rich people and they're very what? Arrogant. And they look down on the poor. Okay? So when we say the poor, of course, Islamically, the status is not based upon your income. A poor person may have a much higher status than a wealthy person. But at the same time, a wealthy person also might be pious and have a much higher status than a poor person. Okay, so At-Tahmani, he goes to her and he gets some questions, asked her some questions. And one, that she was poor, her family was poor. And that she was the wife of a carpenter, and that he mentioned that she had many children with her husband. So then she tells her story. At-Tahmani mentions her story. He says one day Aqta, he was one of the blasphemous kings, and he wanted to attack the region. And this is a huge region that we're talking about. And Abu Abbas, he was a historian, somebody who was reporting this event. The king, Al-Aqta', I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name, was a blasphemer, and he was very unjust. He was a tyrant. And he had a great hatred, he had a great hatred for the Muslims. And he wanted to cause a lot of harm to the Muslims. This region was very large, so it's very hard to defend it. Okay? And what would happen in the wintertime, often in the summer when the river is thawed, it's easier to defend because you can defend the bridges. But it gets so cold up in that region that the rivers freeze. So then what happens? The areas from which you can get attacked become what? Much greater. Okay, the bridges, you know where the bridges are. In the summer, they have to usually, if they try to attack you by the boats, then you can see them floating. It's easy to defend against the boats, the little boats in the river. But what happens now when the river freezes? They can come from what? By horses. They can attack much quicker over a much broader area. So what happened was that the Muslims paid tribute to this tyrant to stop his harm from attacking the Muslims. You give him some money, then he won't what? Attack. But 1 year, for whatever reason, he was not satisfied with the tribute. Whether it was not enough or he heard some other kings were getting more. So he got his army together to come and attack the region. And the forces, as we said, that were dedicated to protecting the region could not protect. It's too big. You can't get the army to protect the whole area. So he came into the Muslim lands and he was destroying and burning and murdering and doing what he wanted, meaning he and his army. And the ruler of Causation, he heard about it, so he raised leaders, the military commanders, that would try to find this army so that they could confront it. But it wasn't easy. And this winter, when the rivers were frozen, they came into the Muslim lands and spilled a great deal of the blood of the Muslims. So when this tyrant, his army came into the region where Lady Rahmah was and her family, the people, they gathered their belongings and they went into the fortress. You know, in the old days, what happened? You'd have the city, and then you had the fortress itself, which would be like a city inside, and then you'd have the town and then the fields for farming and things on the outside. But when an army would come, an enemy army would come, then what would happen? The people would retreat into the fortress, and then they would be able to better to defend themselves and protect themselves. So what happened is the people, they retreated into the fortress. And then some of the young people, some of the young men that were in the fortress, they decided that they were going to go out of the fortress and fight this tyrant. Because if they just stay, the army might keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And if they just are on the defensive, then what might happen? They might be able to break them. They might be able to get into the fortress. So some of the young men, they carried what they could of arms. They went outside of the fortress and they fought. And they fought. And they fought even into the night. Because usually in those old days, you did not fight at night. Why? Because you what? You can't see. Okay? And back then, usually you're going to be fighting with what? Swords, close distance. Okay, you might start with the arrows, and it mentions that they were using the bow and arrows, and they were using until their bows broke. So they were fighting, and you know back then they fought what? Usually face to face, not sniper guy 5, 6, 7, 800 yards away. They're fighting using a lot of energy. Okay, so they were fighting even until the night, and they fought, but eventually most of them were killed. Most of the men were killed, and the rest of them were severely wounded. And then when later when they retreated, because some of the support, the commanders of one of the commanders that was sent came into the area, and when they came, then this pagan army, these kuffar, they left. And so then Lady Rahmah said, since the blasphemous king, or when the blasphemous king came into the area, the army. When the blasphemers attacked the area where Lady Rahmah was, then the warning signals were sent. They had fires that they would light in high places, and that would let the people know, oh, that's where they are. Because of course, back then you didn't have what? Radios and things like that. And then they came, and then when the relief came, the enemy army fled. But most of the men, the young men that were sent out to fight, they were killed. So after that, what happened? They brought the bodies into the town, and there were about 400 young people that were the young men that went outside the fortress, and they were killed. And practically every family, they lost somebody. Okay, a lot of grief. And it was a great calamity. This is what Lady Rahmah said. It was a great calamity, and one could hear crying everywhere. Because you can think of all the grief. MashaAllah, may Allah protect us. We haven't experienced that here. But you look at like what's happening in Syria. That you can feel the heaviness like it becomes like saturated in the town. Because all these people, they're losing, like people, like when a young man gets killed, he's in the prime of his life. This is going to bring great grief. Not only that, these are young men, many of them are what? Taking care of their families. Okay, so the town is feeling the weight of the grief. And then Lady Rahmah said, they brought my husband who had been killed. He was killed in the battle. And they brought him and they put him before me. And I was very sad. I was in a situation which a young woman would be in when they bring her husband and the father of their young children before them, meaning killed. So she's a young woman, and we already said they were what? Were they from a wealthy family? No, they were already poor. And he was working and they were poor. And she has many children, and now she loses her husband. This is going to make her feel what? More grief. She said, my woman relatives gathered to help me. My children, who were very young and could not understand anything, came asking for bread, and I didn't have anything to give them. Because they already, we said, they live what? From day to day. Now they're hungry, they're asking for food, and she can't what? She doesn't have anything to give them. She said, I heard the adhan of Maghrib, and I rushed to pray. And I prayed as much as Allah willed for me to pray. Meaning she prayed the Maghrib, obligatory Maghrib, and then she what? Prayed Nafilah, prayed the Sunnah. Prayed and prayed and prayed after she made the obligatory prayer. Then she said, I made sujood and started supplicating to Allah. When you're in sujood, this is the best time to make the dua, to ask Allah Ta'ala. What's sujood? Waqtabib. Make sujood to get close in obedience and acceptance to Allah Ta'ala. We don't mean by distance or direction, because we know Allah Ta'ala does not exist at a distance or in a direction, because Allah is not an object. When we talk about distance, we talk about the distance between one thing to another. We're talking about what? Objects, aren't we? Say, what's the distance between this cup and my left hand? Okay, we're talking about two objects. What's the distance between Memphis and Little Rock, Arkansas? We're talking about what? Objects, city limits. Allah Ta'ala is not something with a size. Allah doesn't have a shape. So we don't speak about Allah being in a distance or in a direction. Okay, how many primary directions are there?
4.
How many primary directions are there?
6.
6, not cardinal directions, primary. There's what? The front to a given object, the what? The back, the right and left, the two sides, and what? Above and below. Allah Ta'ala existed and there were no directions. Allah existed before any of the creations existed. So Allah Ta'ala is not in a direction. So when we speak of being close, some people may say being close to Allah, we don't mean by distance, but we mean by submission. Just like somebody may say, I'm very close to my Muslim mother. Although he might live in another country, he can still be what? Close. Meaning what? He loves her very much. Okay? So he feels a great feeling for her. So when we say about being close to Allah, some people use the phrase, usually we don't use it, but with the meaning of one has submitted himself to Allah Ta'ala and he or she is in a state of obedience to Allah Ta'ala. Or he is accepted by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Or she. So she, Lady Rahmah, what did she do? The Maghrib prayer time came in, and what did she do? She went and she prayed. And then after she prayed her 3 rak'ahs, what did she do? She prayed Sunnah. And then while she was in one of those rak'ahs, she was in sujood. What did she do? What was she doing while she was in sujood? She was making dua. And then what happened to her? She said, and look, when she had her calamity, what did she turn to? To prayer. You see this? When she had her husband got lost, did she just sit around and get depressed? What did she do? She prayed what she had to pray, and then she prayed what? More. Okay? She didn't sit around and just stay in a state of grief. She prayed her duty or obligation, and then she went beyond what she was required to pray. And that's the habit of the righteous people. When they have a difficulty or a calamity, they don't sit around and just feel sad or sorry for themselves. What do? They increase their acts of obedience. Because when the calamity comes, it's a window that a person can earn more reward, inshallah. So she was praying, and she was praying, and she was praying. And she was in sujood, and then she said, out of my tiredness, I fell asleep in sujood. So she was in sujood, and she fell asleep. And then she said, while she's in sujood, while she's sleeping, she said, I saw a dream. And in that dream, I was in a beautiful land with stones, meaning like the precious stones, like rubies. And I was seeking my husband. So she's in the dream, and now she's what? Looking for, she's seeing this beautiful land, and she's looking for her husband. A voice called me and said, where are you going? And she said, I am looking for my husband. And he said, meaning this voice, go to your right. And I did that. And I reached a level land that was easy to walk through, where there was lots of water and grass. There were castles and buildings so beautiful that they are beyond description. I never saw anything like them. I saw rivers running on the surface of the ground without banks. You know, in paradise, the rivers don't run in the ground, they run on top of the ground. You understand what I mean? Usually if you go to the river, you have to walk down the bank to get to the water. In paradise and Al-Jannah, the rivers flow on top of the ground. And then she said, I reached people who were sitting in circles. They were wearing green clothes. They were surrounded with light. And they themselves were illuminated. These were the people that were killed in the battle. They were eating food that was placed before them. I started going among them, looking at their faces. She's saying, I'm trying to find my husband. And then he called me, and he said, Ya Rahmah. And I went to the direction of the voice. And I found him in the same situation as the other martyrs. They're sitting around the circles, and there's food there. His face was like the full moon. And he was eating with some friends that had been killed that day. He told his friends, this poor one is hungry today. Do you mind if I give her something to eat? And they permitted him. He gave me a piece of bread. And she said, now again, this is in the dream. Okay, this is in the dream. She said, I knew that it was bread, but I did not know how such bread was made. It was whiter than snow. It was whiter than snow and milk. White, pure white. It was sweeter than honey and sugar, and softer than the butter and the ghee. I ate it, and when the bread reached my stomach, he said, meaning her husband said to her, go. You don't need to eat or drink anymore until you die. She said, I woke up and I was feeling satisfied. I did not need to eat or drink. I never tasted food or drink since that day. So she had this dream, and then in the dream, what happened?
She ate the bread.
She ate the food that her husband gave her. And the husband had been a shaheed, a battlefield martyr. And then she said, after I ate this food, which I had in the what? In the dream, that I never had to eat again. Okay, let's mention some more. Abu Abbas, this was another scholar, he said she would be around the people sometimes when we ate, and she would stay away, and when the people were eating the food, she would hold her nose. Like the smell of the food didn't smell good to her. Okay? Because when you think about it, what is really the food? It might taste good when you eat it, and then what happens a few hours later? It's repulsive, isn't it? When it comes out the body, right? This thing that you like so much, and then after it leaves the body, it's what? It's repulsive. This shows you the nature of the dunya. The Prophet said this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that this dunya is like that which is excreted from the body, meaning the number 2 when the person goes to the bathroom. You see, because it's base, it's low. It's called dunya. Dunya, dun means low. Okay, dunya. This is a low place. Unless you use it in obedience to Allah. If you use it in obedience to Allah, then you can attain a very what? High status. But the one who just lives in this world trying to get satisfaction out of this world, they're going to be miserable. We talk so many times, we talk about like these actors and these singers. They try to chase after this world, and then you see their lives. How are their lives? sad, miserable. Many of them, what, on drugs? And you find even some of them, don't they kill themselves? Although of dunya, don't they have everything? Because it's really, this life is not about this dunya, it's working for the akhirah. Okay, let's mention some more about her. Rahimahullah. So at Tahmani, he's with her and he asked her some questions. He said, I asked her, do you drink anything other than water? And she said no. I asked her, do you pass gas and defecate as other people do? She said, since then I never used a toilet. I asked her, what about the monthly cycle? And she said, it stopped when I stopped eating. And he said, he asked her a personal question. He said, aren't you shy to ask me that? But I won't mention what it is, mashallah. He asked her, what about sleep? How do you sleep? And she said, yes, I sleep, and I sleep very well. And he asked her, what do you see in your sleep? And she said, mashallah, you can see she's clever. Her answers itself, the way she answers. She says, just as you see. Meaning, what normal people see when you sleep. Okay, meaning dreams, whatever she may see. But the way she answered, you can see she's, mashallah, she's clever. And then At-Tahmani mentioned that she received sadaqah. So he asked her, what do you do with the sadaqah, the charity? And she said, I use it to buy clothes for myself and my children. And he said, do you feel cold sometimes? Or bothered by the hot weather? She said, yes. He said, do you feel tired when you walk? And she said, yes. Am I not a human? What's the norm? If you walk a lot, the human being's going to feel what? Tired. But what is her special thing? She doesn't what? Eat. And the drinking the water, I don't know the detail about the water, but she didn't eat for sure. And she didn't drink like milk and things like that. Okay? So the norm, although she's special, extremely special about eating and drinking, that she gets tired, she sleeps like other people. And he asked her, do you make wudu to pray? And she said yes. And I said, why? Because usually what? You make wudu because what? You pass gas or you go to the bathroom. Okay? And he asked her why. And she said, the scholars of fiqh ordered me to do so. And then he said, At-Tahmani, he's thinking, they must have told her that because of the hadith, because one of the things that invalidates your wudu is that you sleep. Okay, but then we know there are some rules about it, but this is what he is deducing. And then she told me, this is what At-Tahmani is reporting, she told me that her abdomen, her stomach area, it caved in, it shrunk up. Okay, because she's not what? Eating. I don't know about the drinking, how much she drank, if she drank, because I'm not clear about this issue. So her stomach like caved in. And I asked a woman who was with us to check that. Because what's the rule? You can't see her, what, a man cannot look at her awrah. That's her awrah, right? That's her private area. We don't look there. So she looked and she found that her abdomen was as she described. And what she did in that area, she like packed it like with like cotton and things like that, so her spine would stay what? Straight. Because you think if your stomach collapsed, then what would happen? All those muscles, you would what? Your back would snap, right? So she packed that area with like different things, clothing or whatever it is, cotton, to keep the what? To keep the back straight. And then, so that's her story. Then At-Tahmani says, after that, I would go to her village, that area, every few years. She would meet me, and she would not add anything or leave anything out. Meaning he's asking her story several times over. Why will he do that? Yeah?
To see if anything changed?
Yeah, to double check her story. Because a liar, what's going to happen? What do we say about a liar? He needs to have what? A good memory, right? Because a liar, he's got to think, okay, I told this person that, but I told that one a slightly different story. He's got to keep track of his lies. When you speak the truth, do you need to have a good memory in this sense? No, because this is what happened, and you tell this person, you tell that person, you tell that. This is what happened. So there's no need to change anything. But a liar, he's going to usually get his what? Lies mixed up. So every few years he asked her, and she gives her always what? The same story. All these other people that are there in the area have talked with her, they give what? The same what? Don't they give the same report? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, okay, this is what happened, and her husband died, and then she was a righteous Muslim, her husband died, and then after that she said she saw a dream. After that she never ate anything. So he said nothing changed about her story. Radiyallahu anha. And I checked her speech with the scholar Abdullah ibn Abdur Rahman that we mentioned earlier. And he said, I heard about her since I was growing up, and I never heard, or I never found anyone claiming, not even claiming, never found anyone even claiming that he heard her about her eating or drinking or defecating. So what is this telling us? One, that it's a story about this righteous woman. How did she get this extraordinary status? Because of her what? Piety. And then also from that, as we finish, is that we learn about the reality of the martyrs. Okay, the one who dies on the battlefield, after they die, their soul immediately goes to where? To paradise. Okay? And then this woman, this righteous woman, she sees this incredible dream. She has this experience in this dream. And then thereafter, she never needs to what? She never eats again. This is amazing. Also from this, mashallah, again, the status of the human being is based on obedience. It's not based upon following some little silly ideology that they make popular this week or next week. You follow? So when we said before that we are not for feminism, we are for what? Women's rights. As we are for all human beings to have the rights that they deserve. Okay? How does a woman or a man, how do they become great? How does the woman or the man become great?
Obedience.
By obedience to the Creator. This is the basis of human excellence. Obedience is the basis for human excellence. Meaning obedience to God, the first condition is to be a Muslim. Okay, obedience is the basis for human excellence. Do you want to be great? How do you become great?
Following the rules.
By obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And in Islam, the woman, does she have the opportunity to become great? Absolutely. How does she become great? By obedience. Does a man have the opportunity to become great? How does he become great? By obedience. And one of the rules in order for the man to be great, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that he wasn't bragging, but to show the emphasis. He said the best of you is the one who is best to his wives, meaning in general. This is a general statement. And he said, and I am the best of you amongst us, among you, to the wives. So the men, they need to be, and the Prophet warned us to take special care of the women. All right. One of the issues about feminism is that the opponents of Islam, they spread this thing, this bad idea. And they want to cause a division between the Muslim man and the Muslim woman. Okay? And one of the issues that we have as Muslim men, there are many Muslim men who are abusive to the women. If you want to follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will not abuse the Muslim woman by your tongue, and you definitely wouldn't abuse them by your hands.
Speech.
Okay? So be careful, because you don't want to make a sin. Some of the brothers here, you don't want to be sinful. So don't abuse someone, whether man or woman. We're talking about our sisters. So observe the rights of the Muslim sisters. And warn and speak out against those brothers who are abusing the sisters. This is a huge issue. Because not only is there the sin on you, and then the injustice to that sister, but then there's also what? You have your enemy outside the door who wants to do what? Yeah, and you know what he'll do? He'll say, look, those Muslim men, look at how they are abusing you. You don't need a man in your life. You don't need Islam in your life, because that's really where the feminists want to take these sisters. They want to tell the sisters, you don't need a man. And then the next step is to tell them you don't need what? Islam. And that's really what the feminists are calling people to. As Muslim, whether you're a Muslim man or a Muslim woman, make sure you observe the Muslimas, the Muslim woman's rights. And the one who's not a Muslim, observe the woman and give her her rights. You will not abuse a woman, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, if you are obeying Allah. And for the sisters, that through the deen of Allah Ta'ala, they have a great opportunity to become among the greatest, the best of creation. Okay? How does one become among the best? I'm not saying to reach the status of prophets, because we cannot become prophets. I don't mean that status. But to reach the status of the ultra-righteous, to become a waliyah, to become an ultra-righteous Muslim. How does one do that? How does one become among the best of the best in general? What do we say? Through obedience. Human excellence through obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And be careful, because sometimes these feminists, they will feed a certain talk that appeals to the nafs. Oh, you can be free. Oh, you can be independent. In reality, we as Muslim men, we are in need of Muslim women. And Muslim women are in need of Muslim men. Okay? The Prophet told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we should be like the what? The bricks
of the wall.
the bricks of the wall, the bricks of the building. And then what did he do? He interlaced the fingers. Okay? Now, of course, when you say the Muslim men and the Muslim women, that certain issues like how we interact, the men interact with the women, there are rules. I don't mean like the way these people talk about, okay? There are rules in terms of how we interact. But to give the rights to the sisters, because for the brothers, one, you don't want to fall into sin. Two, you don't want to abuse the rights of someone else. And three, you have the opponents of Islam who are looking for things, weak spots to attack Islam. And the last point, what is a lesson from this? There are many other lessons, but what is the lesson that we were talking about from the last lesson and the introduction here? Causes don't create. Normally you eat the food, and the food is the means that make you what? Full and give you nutrition. Okay? That is what sustains you. But we know in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. So if Allah ta'ala wills for a person to feel sustained without food, this is a clear example of a person, this Muslimah, this ultra-righteous Muslim, who was sustained without food. I mentioned another case, opposite case. There was during the time of Hussein, you know, Hassan and Hussein were the sons of Imam Ali. Ali was the fourth of the caliphs. That there was during one of the battle at the end of Hussein's life, they blocked the Imam Hussein from getting to the well to drink water. Okay? So Imam Hussein made dua against this person that he would not feel quenched from drinking. And this person, he would drink and drink and drink, and his stomach would not feel what? Satiated from the water. To the point that what happened? He drank so much that his stomach, it burst open. Why is that? Because the water, the drink, does not create the what? Quenching. Who creates the quenching? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali, the father of Hussein. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for Imam Ali that he would not be affected by the climate, by the weather. So you would find Imam Ali in the summertime, he would wear the winter clothing, the heavier clothing, and it wouldn't what? Bother him. And in the wintertime, he would wear the summer clothing, because the cold would not what? It wouldn't bother him. Because who creates the heat in the body? Allah Ta'ala. We go by the norm. The norm is what? When you're cold, you wear what? Heavier clothes. When you're hot, you wear what? Lighter clothes. But we know without a doubt that Allah Ta'ala is the creator. So Allah Ta'ala may make one person feel what? Comfortable in one situation, and another person will feel what? Uncomfortable. Isn't that the case even with the weather? Mm-hmm. One person will be telling you, man, it's so hot out here. And another person's what? Feeling cold. Because Allah is the one who creates. Allah is the one who creates the satisfaction. Allah Ta'ala is the one who creates the dissatisfaction. The causes are what we go by because we know that that's what usually happens, but we know the causes don't create, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates. And if we look at the story of Lady Rahmah, it's very clear that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates. Allah Ta'ala is the creator of everything, and Allah Ta'ala does whatever He wills. Walhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala rasulillah. Barakallahu fikum. And we can make tahleel, inshallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين